have some regular people.
Yeah.
I'm going to call this meeting to order. Good morning. Welcome.
Morning.
If I do anything, I make any rookie mistakes, feel free. I got a lot of experienced folks in here who I'm sure will correct me. The first order of business is a roll call. Mr. Donahue.
Thank you, Vice Chair Scott. Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Hines.
Present.
Mr. Kovacic.
Present.
Ms. Link. Mr. Mitchell.
Present.
Ms. Revel. Mr. Scott.
Present.
And Mr. Smith. We do have a quorum.
First order of business is to approve the April minutes. Is there any other motion?
Move the approve the minutes presented.
Properly moved in second. Any discussion? Corrections?
Mr. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. Kovacic.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you. Financials? Finance?
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm just going to go over the quick overview of the April 2019 financial statement. For the month of April, the total current asset was $316,082, and capital asset totaled $1,205,661. That was for the, I think, the land. Is including hotel and air. Other asset, including property held for resale, which as you can see is Schedule A, totaled $16,739,634 for a total asset $19,882,758. Liability, which is including accounts payable, $4,843, and also a revenue note, $5,217,000. Net position, investment in capital asset was $1,205,000 and $661. Restricted net position was $316 and $82, and unrestricted was $13,139,000 and $173. For the income statement, total operating expense was $4,400. Sorry, wrong one. Total operating expense was $13,116, and non-operating income in net to non-operating expense net to $1,978, and for a total change in net position, $15,094 on this. Then you will see the Schedule A. This is the April activity for all the property for resale. And the Schedule B is the detailed activity report for all the expenses for all the property the EDA has. The next schedule is the local incentive grant. We did update the schedule. As you can see, the bottom of the page, left corner, is saying the total local incentive available to be awarded only $15,784. The remaining balance to be paid in FY19 at April was $190,262. And the next one is just pool cash and recon. I'm happy to answer any question you may have.
Any questions, Commissioner? And thank you for your report, for information purposes only. Old business. Mr. Hines and Mr. Kovacic. Budget.
Yeah, so you guys talked about the budget last time. A lot of it's just going forward from the fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20. The noted changes would be the sale of land going up for some properties that are expected to sell this year. Under business development, that includes the rent for the EDA building, which was talked about last time. The way I understand it is that it's in a kind of a good faith agreement with the city manager that come June 1, July 1, they'll pass an amendment to pay that $50,000. So that should be coming back. Other than that,
And that's line 24.
14.
I'm sorry, line 14.
Yes, that's 14.
Yeah, I'm old.
And I think just to kind of dovetail, and as we were talking about the budget, is we did have a number of additional expenses, primarily tied to the reacquisition of the Victory Village projects that we're going to have to take on some additional costs associated with owning the Victory Village. The $160,000 debt service is a new item in our budget this year. We also have some additional costs for the properties that we inherited from the PRHA that are captured in this budget, plus another item that my fellow partner with the budget group suggested that we do a 10% of other maintenance to cover anything that's outside of the grass cutting contract. Per se. So I think this budget is one that does meet the needs going forward. It is probably one of our largest budgets that I've seen as a member of the CDA, but we're taking on some making some pretty big headways here and putting a sizable investment into especially into the Victory Village project. So, and it's reflective of where we want to go as well. So with that, I certainly would entertain any questions, as well as Mr. Kovacic would as well.
Any questions, Commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept the budget.
With that, I recommend approval of the proposed budget.
Second.
It's been seconded by Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Hines,
Yes.
Mr. Kovacic,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Budget is adopted as noted.
The next item of business is a motion that it comes back to the body, 1140 London Boulevard. I think it's a FIG application. Mr. Donahue, you want to bring us up to speed? I think Mr. Hines had recommended that we go back and look at this, and it was approved by the commissioners, and that's why we're revisiting it again. You want to say this on that?
Sure. That is correct. This is a carryover item that was deferred at your April 16th meeting. We have received a facade improvement grant application from the quarters at Parkview LLC at 1140 London Boulevard. The applicant is proposing to install 4 decorative wrought iron aluminum gates at the entrances to the community. They have an exhibit here that shows the 4 entrances. The first is on London Boulevard. There are 2 on Elm and a 4th on Enterprise Way. These are some photos of the property. You had asked that this item be deferred for further discussion at today's meeting. Certainly happy to answer any questions you may have. The total cost for the proposed work is $19,938, so we're able to provide a 50% match to that with a contingency allowance, so the grant request would total $9,969.
Any comments, any questions? Sure, Mr. Hines.
First, I'd like to thank the commission for allowing me to have the extra time to review this application. I'm a big believer in kind of reviewing what we've done in the past as in an interest of trying to be as fair going forward in the future. After I went back and reviewed about 4 years worth of these types of grants, I've kind of reversed fields here, kind of from my original inclination. And I'm actually going to be supporting this because of the fact that, A, it's in our application that we can do this. 2, I have spoke with Ms. Link, who is not here, but she does have certifications in security, which was my main hangup. I think people are brought onto this body for their expertise, and we should listen to those people when they bring such expertise. I'm not sure I agree with it being as an allowable expense in the program myself, but being that it is there, I tend to will be one to support this, I believe, this time around. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
With that,
Sure.
I have one question. I don't know if it's related to this, but is there any attempt to have a more targeted utilization of these funds? So, for example, would we focus on the High Street corridor and try to encourage businesses there to start utilizing these funds? Or I know right now it says whoever comes forward with that, but it just seems like there's a great opportunity to improve visually High Street, which is some of the comments that we have, and are we working to try to encourage businesses to use those funds?
That's a very good question. I will say that prior to this year, the program was restricted to the downtown area.
Okay.
There was a considerable interest from other businesses in the city, and the EDA board decided to expand the program to a citywide boundary to allow for other business owners and property owners to take advantage of the program. So it is now available to all properties and businesses in the city. Certainly those in the downtown area, we do want to see them utilizing the program. And we are looking at some opportunities to revisit the application itself in an effort to streamline the program, make it more user-friendly, and easier to administrate. So we would propose coming to you in June with some changes to the program, and I think it would be a good time to discuss some of these issues at that time. If there are any changes you would like to make going forward, that we could certainly entertain those thoughts and considerations in June.
And I will say, I agree with you, and I talked to Mr. Moore about that, and I know in June that there will be some opportunities for revisiting this issue. And I'm like Mr. Hines, I looked at the application thoroughly, and then Ms. Link called me as well and just kind of said, Don, all I'm telling you is it's not security, it's decorative, and and the application is clear that decorative is okay. And so I have to follow what I see here. It says decorative fencing, railing, it's okay. So I didn't want to seem like I was being unfair. I was trying to follow the rules. If I thought it was security, I would not have voted for it. But since I believe that it's not security, it's decorative, it fits within a broad scope within decorative, then I would probably be supporting it as well. And that's the reason. That's the only reason why. Mr. Moody?
Is there anything to prevent it from being adapted to security in the future?
yeah,
Sure, Mom.
yeah, I mean, and this is, I tend to agree with you, Councilman Moody, that's where my main concern was when I asked to have an extra month to kind of mull this over, talk about this. But the problem that we're going to run into, and I think we have to think about how we're going to put our language together, is that facade could be a door, right? And a door could be considered security. I tend to, I wrestle with this. I wrestled with this those 3 or 4 days before we made this decision to defer. But I think you're right that we got to think about, because we do have a carved out like security thing as well, as a potential opportunity. And I think that's for security systems. I think at one point we had that. But I think we'd probably need to revisit this, especially with it being now an entire city worth of opportunity. over the last couple of years, to answer your question, Mr. Mitchell, maybe some historical perspective. When I first came on this commission, it was, I believe, just 2 or 3 zones, and downtown was our primary driver. And then we added Craddock and we added Truxton area, and we still weren't exhausting all of our resource. And then it was actually brought up at one of our city council work sessions that they wanted to explore the entire city, of which it's fantastic to see this number of applications this year that we're able to help businesses. But with that, I think it opens up these types of discussions that we may need to maybe narrow our focus and to maybe make it slightly more, shall I say, either streamlined or people know exactly the rules of what we should do and what we shouldn't do with this. So
Yeah, this is a little broad right now, maybe.
yeah, it's definitely
something we can,
this big, and we probably should
because it
be.
does lend itself to future changes, and so we can't ask people what their future intent is. That's not the way this is written. So we just have to assume that they're being forthright with us at the time that they're coming for the application. So with that, I'll entertain a motion from the floor.
I move for.
Make one more comment. I always thought it was a driver of increasing businesses.
Absolutely.
So I guess my question would be, what is the current occupancy of that apartment complex? So if it's 85 or 90%, then clearly this is not going to be a driver for increasing their business. This is more of something that is a cosmetic change for them. And I think those are the kind of questions that kind of make me question why we would be.
But it's not part of your application.
Well,
That's what we need to change our application. All of those questions should be in our application process.
And I think that should be actually something that we would plug into the matrix that we have here. Maybe we can look at, as part of the questions or criteria, we should say, what do we anticipate in terms of,
What's the impact on
what's
the
our
business?
impact on the business? What's the potential impact on the business? But I think if we deviate too far away from what is on our current program,
Right.
we're not being very
And I
fair
think
to the
those
applicants.
questions are questions we should be asking in the June meeting.
Absolutely.
Consider this issue now, if that's okay. Again, I'll entertain a motion from the floor.
I move that we approve this application as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Kovacic?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
I would like to recognize Mr. Smith is here this morning. Good morning, Mr. Smith.
No.
The motion carries.
Next issue is the Hampton Roads Community Health Center Development Agreement. Everyone received that package and reviewed it, Mr. Donahue?
Yes, this is a follow-up to a letter of intent that was executed between the EDA and Luna Development Services back in January of this year for the development of property in the 1500 block of High Street for the new location of the Hampton Roads Community Health Center facility, which is presently located on Lincoln Street here in Portsmouth, and they are proposing to construct a new replacement facility on High Street. I'm going to turn the table over to Mr. Miller. He's got some additional details I believe he can share with you.
Sure. The Community Health Center, I'm not sure. For those who may not have been on the board when this all started, the health center is in desperate need of a new facility. And they've obtained federal grant funding and have partnered with a third-party developer to build themselves out a facility. At the request of the city, PRHA transferred the 1500 block of High Street to EDA about a year ago so that EDA could facilitate the project. Had one false start with a prior developer that didn't work out, but now the health center has found another developer. Our agreement is with the developer and requires that the developer construct the health center facility. It's got an 8-month permitting period and then closing within 60 days thereafter. If at any point the health center decides that they don't like this developer or want to work with them, we have the right to terminate the agreement and the property is free and clear.
Commissioners, any questions?
So just for the sake of all of those who have not been maybe following this, you're saying that and maybe just to kind of rewind, this property was basically sent down through the process, through city council, to ultimately to us. And this is a no-cost obligation from the EDA standpoint, correct? And so we're not really expending funds at that level. And then this is being primarily grant funded, is what you're telling us.
Yes, yeah, and the property itself was acquired using CDBG, so it's one of the CDBG.
One of the older CBDG properties. Okay. No question. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion.
Move for adoption.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Mr. Donahue?
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Kovacic?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
The motion carries.
New business, participation policy, the call-in meetings, I think we're going to modify that, Mr. Donahue.
This is really an item for discussion today. The question had been raised to staff about the ability of an EDA commissioner to call in remotely to a meeting to participate in the meeting and discussions. So we have consulted with the city attorney's office. I'll allow for Mr. Miller to provide you some additional background on what the code allowances are for doing that. But generally speaking, this is really just kind of a discussion item for you this morning to determine if it's something that you would like to proceed with perhaps in June with amending the policy to allow for that. I believe at present our bylaws do not allow for that. So Jeff, if you want to.
Yeah, sure. For a long time under the Virginia Code, it was very difficult to allow a board member to call in or participate by video. A couple years ago, the code was amended, and it's a little bit easier now, but it can only be done pursuant to an adopted policy of the board. And the reason for that is they want to make sure it's uniformly applied so that you can't say, well, we don't want that guy calling in anyway, or we really like this guy to call in. There are two
We
reasons.
can't do that?
There are two bases you can use. You can have no policy at all, in which case there's no participation remotely. Or you can have a policy, and the greatest extent of the policy can be that someone can call in if they have some sort of continuing disability, some sort of physical issue, where they can't make it. And then the other reason for not calling in is twice a year you can have a personal matter that you have to specifically identify, and in that situation you could call in twice a year. Now, any adopted policy could be nothing all the way up to the full extent of the law or anything in between. But right now the max could be someone has a personal issue twice a year, that person could call in. If you wanted to adopt that as a policy, the person would have to be on speakerphone, or just everyone in the room has to be able to hear that person. You have to document in the minutes exactly what's happening, including what the nature of the personal matter is that prevents the person from calling in. And that's pretty much it. As Mr. Donahue said, your chair wanted us to throw this out for discussion today. I think it's probably something that it's worth thinking about over the next month and coming back next meeting and really having a full discussion on it. I think there are a lot of pros and cons. At first it seems like you'd think, great, more participation is better, but then you think about the mechanics of actually having someone on the phone and you're sitting around with 6 people present and 1 person on the phone. Is that how you want to have a meeting? So there it is.
Any comment? Yes, sir, Mr.
So this would
Smith.
include being able to vote too?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilwoman?
The city council doesn't have such a policy at this time, do we?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, I don't.
And there have been a couple of times where we've allowed phone calls, but no votes were taken.
Right. Just to listen
Information.
and to comment.
Just information, comment, yeah.
Well, can we put this on a more robust June agenda? And then we can have more of the conversation about it and just give us time to mull it over and think about what our positions. I know my initial reaction is not good. I think we only have a few people in the city who are allowed and appointed to this position. And I think those few people ought to be present. That's just my gut reaction. But I'm open to the disability issue or some kind of long-term issue, health issue, or a family emergency. But I'll listen to that. But my gut reaction is city council people have to be present for the most part. So I think we should be present as well.
And-
Yes, sir, Mr.
And I feel similar. I think if there's a special need for it, maybe we could have it so we could consider it. But to have it, routine as part of, our everyday business, I would be opposed to it also.
Any other comments? Not, thank you, and we'll move to the website support issue. Mr. Hines?
Yes, I'd like to thank the chair for allowing me to have this on the agenda. What I was, it's kind of this, I saw this happen at another locality, and it's actually turned out to I was looking for a place to eat close to where I was, and this city had support, like you typed in, where you were in the city, and your northern part of the city, the central, southern part of the city. Then you actually type in your address, and it actually shot up a number of different places to eat that were within walking distance. And you could click on the little thing, and it would show a little picture of the business and what type of food they sold and that type of thing. And it kind of just got me thinking, with the success of the sale app that you guys had for the real estate, is this something that we could look at as a body to and allow everybody in the city, to participate in this that would want to, maybe a pinpoint thing on like a Google map or something like that, that would just give one more opportunity for Portsmouth business. So instead of us crossing a line over to Chesapeake or over to Norfolk, maybe there might be businesses that do the exact same thing just in our backyard, where we haven't done a very good job in terms of putting our best foot forward in terms of marketing those businesses. Specifically here just in High Street, for example, there's a number of businesses that, I try to shop here in Portsmouth myself first, and, there's businesses popping up, we're starting to grow a little bit, and I think we've got to try our very best to do something to help support that. Maybe like an app or something of that nature where we can hit there and they do like a geolocate of all the businesses that are within our area. Like I said, it worked for that locality. I ended up walking down the street and got a great lunch, and instead of supporting somewhere else. So I wanted to throw that out there. It's just kind of an idea to catch the appetite of the commission to see if that's something that you'd be interested in.
I would always rely on staff who I know are the great ambassadors for the city to try to see if that's something that they want to put on their to-do list.
Sure. So I can respond.
And come back with something.
I can respond to that. We obviously have a great interest in supporting our local businesses and doing what we can to spread the word. It's a little bit tricky and kind of a difficult position to be in when it comes to showcasing specific businesses in the city. And I say that because you may have some that choose to participate directly, others who may not in that type of program or application. So you certainly don't want to leave anybody out for lack of their ability or willingness to participate. So it can be somewhat of a tricky scenario where you're perhaps showcasing some businesses over others, and we never want to find ourselves in a position where, as a city department, we're doing that. We certainly work to market and showcase, to the extent that we can, activities and things that are happening in the city, whether it's a ribbon cutting, grand opening, so forth. We have not had any considerations of providing an app or type of program to do that directly. What we have found is that our local and regional partners do a pretty good job of working to do that. So I would provide, as an example, the Old Town Business Association. They have a really fantastic website they've recently overhauled. And they do showcase not just restaurants, but other businesses and other destinations in the downtown area. And I believe that's something that can be done through those types of organizations on a citywide basis. The Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce and the Retail Merchants Association are two other organizations that can do that from a non-governmental side. And they have much more flexibility to do that without putting themselves in a situation where perhaps they're in a position where they're highlighting one business as opposed to another. We'll certainly work through our social media efforts, if there are opportunities to promote Portsmouth businesses, small businesses as they open, to make those announcements so that folks are aware. We have not given any consideration to an application, a web app, or anything like that. But certainly if that's something that you all would like to discuss further, we'd be open to having that conversation. It's just I want to make very clear, it's kind of a tricky position for a government department to take on.
And let me just make sure I'm real clear here. This is not one of those deals where I would say we're going to highlight this one over this one. We make it open to anybody in the city to be able to search by what they do. You know, if they sell plumbing supplies, if we're not highlighting our Portsmouth business, and you've got, XYZ company just over the line, we're really not, helping our own businesses grow. So I get what you're saying. I do, and I understand there's probably some. But if a business chooses not to participate and not get a piece of free advertising, there's nothing I can do to help you at that point. But yeah, I think we should look at something like this. And as far as, and I guess this is maybe, I think I'm pretty connected for the most part. I listen to pretty much every meeting that happens here in the city that's available on YouTube, at least. And there's things that happen in this city I don't know how happen. So I think we just need to figure out a way to better communicate on behalf of our businesses, on behalf to our citizens, and to kind of help our own people grow organically. And maybe that's not the right answer, but maybe this is something we can add for maybe a work session or something of that nature at a later time. I understand there's challenges, but there's challenges that worth anything worthwhile. And if the company, if the city to the west of us can do it, there's no reason why we can't.
I personally think you're on to something. I'm not sure it's the website, but I do think that there's an opportunity to create some committee that focuses on High Street. For instance, I don't understand why we couldn't have a restaurant night where you close down High Street and the restaurants come out on the street. You have music or something that draws people over to see what we have to offer that they may not have thought of. We got empty stores. There could be pop-up stores. They're doing a lot of that over in Norfolk. They could be regenerated into pop-up stores. So small merchants can come in and show their wares and leverage some of that space. I just think it's a huge opportunity. I just think it needs to have some work focused on how do you leverage that space in a more meaningful way.
So we would agree with you, and this is a focus of ours as we've worked to increase our marketing efforts and outreach through social media. But what we'll work to do is engage with the city's tourism office, because I think they have some resources that they can bring to the table, and also with the Old Town Business Association specifically, to see if there's some ways that we can do that. We can continue this conversation to help with the needs of the local business community.
And I tend to agree with Mr. Scott, actually. This is probably a discussion that should be led maybe by staff, and y'all vet some of these ideas out, but I wanted to throw this as an idea that is, like I said, it hit me in a real life application. And I said, this is probably something we should at least look at, whether it be this particular iteration of it or some other iteration, to where, especially as we move through this budget, and the investments we're making into the city, we need to invest in our current businesses that are here. If we want to continue to grow revenues to where these fine people to the right of us don't have to wrestle with, revenue not growing, we need to figure out how we can invest $1 to help our businesses make $3, so we can, raise those revenues for essential city functions. So I think we need to have that discussion probably more often than we are. And would love to hear, yours and Robert's wonderful ideas on this. I'm sure the Sale app started with a very similar conversation at one point here and ended up at some point way over here. So I think we need to kind of put our focus there.
Allow for us to have some conversations internally, and then we can come back to you. And I may reach out to you offline just to get some additional information about your experiences.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And
Thank
what
you.
your thoughts are. So
Thank you.
certainly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hines. The program update, Mr. Dunning?
At your April meeting, I believe it was Commissioner Hines had requested an update on the status of the city's local incentives program. So what we thought we would do would just be to provide some historical reference for you. The program was established back in 2014. The EDA made a very wise decision to expand the program based on demand this fiscal year, and also increase the funding, the annual allocation to $300,000 based on that demand. You'll see it has increased annually since 2014, and to date, this fiscal year, of the $300,000 that you had appropriated to the program, we have expended or obligated $273,000 of that. And I can share with you that the remaining 26,500 and so remaining funds, we have applications in hand under review for the remaining funds in the program. So it's our expectation that all of those funds will be obligated by the end of June.
Great. Any questions, Commissioners?
Oh.
It's a quick
That's wonderful.
listing.
I was just going to ask that question. Is this the sectors in which the funding was given to?
So these are the 23 that have been approved and obligated to date. And you'll note there are a number of different industry sectors there that we track. Quite a spread there. Quite an impact as well with new and expanding businesses throughout the city. And again, I think that was the objective when the EDA decided to go citywide, was really to broaden that reach and make sure that the impact was felt throughout the community. A few photos of some of the businesses that were able to obtain assistance through the program. So just a small sampling. We'll continue to share these with you as we work to close out the remaining projects, but really a pretty significant return on investment. I know we talk about return on investment a lot, but it is a big bang for the buck, I think, what you all are doing.
Any other questions for Mr. Donahue? Thank you.
Thank you.
That was exactly what we asked for.
Yep,
Really appreciate
exactly.
that. Joint meeting with PPIC?
It's a lot.
Yes. Annually, the EDA and PPIC hold a joint meeting. We're looking at the month of September to hold that, specifically September 17th, to bring both boards and commissions here together. You would each hold your individual meetings and then have a joint meeting to have some discussion and dialogue. We're proposing that again for September 17th. That would occur, I believe, here in this room. And I think it'd be a great opportunity to talk about which each body is doing and perhaps set some directions for the coming year. So we'd like to propose that that meeting be held jointly in September.
Okay. We don't need a vote on that. So, that's good. All right, appreciate it. Next, Mr. Hines, we want to go into closed meeting on this Victory Village.
Actually, there was a slight change to it, so I'll go ahead and read it if it's all right. and you can
All
finish
means.
it off. I move to go into closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2 3711A3 for the purpose of discussing acquisition and disposition of publicly held real property interests, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, specifically regarding 409 McLean Street and Victory Village.
So moved.
Somebody second.
Oh, second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. That we go into closed session. Roll call.
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Gavacik?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
We're now in closed meeting. Any guests and/or visitors, we'd ask you to leave at this time.
I hereby move that each board member certify that to the best of his or her knowledge that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters were identified in the motion by the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded.
Donahue?
Wait a second.
Oh, second.
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Gavacik?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Last item. 409 McLean Street resolution. Everyone has had the opportunity to review that resolution for an extension. I'd like to entertain a motion from the floor.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Gavacik?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Any comments now that we've reached the end, anything for the good of the body before we adjourn? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.